You're not my husband. You don't get to make financial decisions for my family. I stood in the kitchen, the scent of antiseptic still clinging to my hands from cleaning up her father. 3 years, Chloe, I said, my voice hoarse. I'm up at 6 a.m. and I don't get to bed until 2. You're telling me I don't get a say? She scoffed. That was your choice. No one forced you. The words cut like a knife. I was once the star project manager at my company on the fast track. The offer for an expat assignment in our European headquarters was on my desk, waiting for a signature. For her, I stayed. Her parents were semi-paralyzed, and I was the one who managed everything. The feeding, the cleaning, the bedpans. I thought we were fiancés. I thought we were family. But she had just told me the truth. A ring isn't a marriage license. In that moment, everything became clear. I wasn't her fiancé. I was the free, live-in caretaker. I took off the apron and laid it on the counter. Fine, I said. I'm done. She thought I was throwing a tantrum. She had no idea I'd already called my company to get my expat assignment back. A week later, I was dragging my suitcase through the airport. She was there crying. Can you really be this cruel? I looked at her. It was a cruel thing to say. As the plane climbed through the clouds, I deleted her number, her texts, her photos, every last trace of her. 3 years of my life given away. It ended now. 0-1 because of my fiancé's words. A ring isn't a marriage license. I walked away from her semi-paralyzed parents, broke our engagement, and left the country. That's when she finally panicked. It wasn't a decision made in anger. It was the last straw on a weight I'd been carrying for 3 years. My name is Liam Foster. I'm 32, a project manager for a medical device company. 3 years ago, I had an offer to lead a core project at our European headquarters. The day I was supposed to sign a contract, Chloe Price's parents were in a car accident. Both were left semi-paralyzed. The doctor said they were lucky to be alive, but they would need round-the-clock care for the rest of their lives. Chloe was an only child, a bank teller with a modest salary. She stood outside the hospital room, her eyes swollen from crying, telling me she was all alone. We were already engaged then, even had a down payment on a house. My heart went out to her, and I made the call to postpone the assignment. Let's focus on getting your parents stable first, I told her. She hugged me, clinging to me like a lifeline. In that moment, I truly saw myself as the pillar of her family. For the next 3 years, my life was shattered into a million little pieces. I'd wake up at 6 to clean her father, turn him over, and change the absorbent pads under him. Her mother had a short temper, and her incontinence often left her feeling both ashamed and furious. I kneel by her bed, cleaning her up while trying to soothe her. I learned how to blend liquid meals, getting the temperature right down to the degree. I learned to recognize dozens of medications and their precise dosages. I learned to jolt awake at the slightest sound in the night. One time, around 2 in the morning, her father was struggling to breathe. I carried him down the stairs on my back and rushed him to the ER. By the time we got back, the sun was rising. I fell asleep against the hallway wall, and when I woke up, my neck was so stiff I couldn't lift my head. The neighbors all said I was like a son to them, but I wasn't. I was just a fiancé. And Chloe? She worked her 9 to 5, then spent her evenings scrolling through her phone. She was always talking about how stressed she was, telling me to be more understanding. The household expenses were huge, and she nickel and dimed everything. Just use the generic pads. Why are you buying the expensive imported ones? That nutritional powder is so pricey. Can you use a little less? I never argued. When someone is bettered in, you don't cut corners. The night that changed everything was the one that finally made my heart turn cold. Her mother developed a bedsore because I hadn't turned her quite fast enough. I ran out to the 24-hour pharmacy and bought better pads and a special medicated cream. It cost over $100. When I got home, Chloe saw the receipt and her face darkened. What is wrong with you? Do you have money to burn? Why would you buy the most expensive option for something like this? Your mom's skin is broken, I said. If we try to save a few bucks now, it's going to cost a lot more down the road. She slapped the receipt down on the table, her frustration boiling over. Could you stop making decisions on your own? We're not even married yet. Why are you so involved? I froze. Then she delivered the line that woke me from my 3-year delusion. A ring isn't a marriage license, Liam. You're not family, so stop meddling. The air went still. I just stood there, the pharmacy bag still in my hand. For 3 years, I had changed diapers, cleaned bodies, and carried them to the hospital. I had given up a career-making opportunity and passed on promotions. I had drained the money we'd saved for our down payment to cover their nursing expenses. And in her eyes, I was just a temp, a volunteer. I almost laughed. Then what am I? I asked her. My stare made her flinch, but she doubled down, her voice hardening. Don't be so dramatic. I'm just stating a fact. A fact, right? A fact. I didn't argue anymore that night. I put down the new pads, applied the ointment, and did the final round of turning them for the night. Her father watched me, his expression complicated, but he said nothing. The next day, I took a personal day. I called my old boss. The overseas position was still a possibility. I told him I was ready to leave anytime. He was direct. This is a major opportunity, Liam. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. When I got home, I put the real estate contract on the table. The house we were supposed to buy, our marital home, had been on the market for 2 weeks, and I just accepted an offer. It sold for a nice profit over what I'd put down. Chloe's face went pale when she saw the paperwork. What is this? I'm breaking the engagement, I said calmly. Since we're not a couple, there's no reason for me to be living here anymore. She stared at me for a few seconds, then completely lost it. If you leave now, what happens to them? How can you be so heartless? Heartless? For 3 years, I'd barely visited my own parents. On holidays, I was in her kitchen, pureeing food. When she worked late, I stayed up. When she was in a bad mood, I was there to listen to her curse her fate. Now, because I wanted to live for myself for a change, I was the heartless one. I didn't bother explaining. I helped her find a local home care agency, arrange for their basic services, and paid for the first 3 months. I'd done more than enough. My conscience was clear. The day I packed my bags, she followed me from room to room, her tone shifting from soft to sharp. Liam, are you still mad at me? Don't go. I was just upset the other day. What am I going to do by myself if you leave? I zipped my suitcase shut and, for the first time, didn't look back. You were right, I said. We're not married. This isn't my obligation. Saying it out loud felt like a weight lifting. She actually showed up at the airport. She grabbed my sleeve, her eyes red and puffy. You can't just leave like this. You'll be killing my parents. People were starting to stare. I slowly pried her fingers off my arm. They're not my parents. Her face went ashen, as if she was truly hearing those words for the first time. The boarding call echoed through the terminal. I turned and walked toward security without stopping again. As the plane taxied down the runway, my phone buzzed. A barrage of frantic texts from her, one after another, followed by a voicemail. I stared at the screen for a second, feeling no desire to even listen. I deleted her contact. The screen went quiet. The moment the plane broke through the clouds, I felt the crushing weight I'd been carrying for 3 years begin to fall away. I leaned back in my seat and, for the first time, felt like I could breathe again. I heard later from a friend that she had to quit her job to take care of her parents. She couldn't afford a professional caregiver, and relatives were reluctant to help out regularly. He said she'd lost a lot of weight and her temper had gotten worse. By the time this news reached me, I was in Frankfurt preparing a presentation for a new project. I never looked back, because that night, when she said, "A ring isn't a marriage license," she had already severed everything between us. I finally understood. When only one person is holding everything up, it isn't love. It's just being used. And I was done being used. 02. The moment the plane landed in Frankfurt, my phone was a clean slate. Nothing but work, emails, and flight information. Her name was gone. The number I once knew by heart was gone. I dragged my suitcase out of the airport. The air was cold, the city unfamiliar. For the first time, I realized my future would no longer revolve around hospital bed. The company put me up in a small corporate apartment, a bed, a desk, and not much else. There was no smell of cooking grease or antiseptic. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I woke up at 2 a.m., instinctively listening for the sound of cough. There was nothing. The silence was deafening. The next day, I was thrown directly into the project team. The lead was a German man named Karl, in his 50s, with sharp, perceptive eyes. He went over my resume, his questions precise. Why did you pass on this assignment the first time? I didn't mention her. I just said I had family matters to attend to. He studied me for a few seconds. And this time, you won't be backing out again. I won't. He nodded, pushing a stack of files across the table. Then prove it to me. The project's pace was relentless, with almost no time to breathe. Meetings ran from morning till night. All the documents were in English, and the technical standards were far more rigorous than what I was used to. That first week, I worked late almost every night. But strangely, I wasn't tired. It wasn't the same kind of exhaustion I'd felt for the past 3 years. This pressure came from the work itself, not from being slowly drained of my life force. At the weekly meeting in the second week, I proposed an improved methodology. Carl shot it down on the spot, his tone harsh. Your data is insufficient. This isn't what we need. The room went cold. In the past, I might have backed down. But this time, I laid out all the supplementary data I had prepared. Here are the results from additional testing, along with the cost analysis. I spoke quickly, laying out my logic point by point. When the meeting ended, Carl didn't praise me. He just said, "You'll be leading this part of the project next week." That was trust. That night, back in my apartment, I ordered takeout for the first time and sat by the window, eating slowly. So this is what it felt like to have your hard work recognized. My life started to find a rhythm. Work during the day, gym in the evening. After 3 months, I dropped 15 pounds and could see the definition returning to my shoulders and back. The man who had been worn down by sleepless nights and anxiety was slowly coming back to life. The project moved ahead smoothly, and I earned a performance bonus. The number in my bank account was double what it had been 3 years ago. One day, Carl called me into his office. Headquarters is putting together a special team for the Asian market. I've recommended you for it. His words meant a more central, more powerful position. I accepted on the spot. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. It was an old colleague from back home, Chris Turner. "Liam, you still overseas?" "Yeah." He hesitated for a moment. "Chloe isn't doing too well." I stayed silent. "She quit her job," he continued. "Her dad's condition got worse, and the nursing costs went up. They're burning through their savings." The line was quiet. Chris lowered his voice. "She asked me to see if you could lend her some money just to get by." I stood on my apartment balcony, watching the traffic below. 3 years ago, I'd left her a portion of the money from the house sale for emergencies. She'd said she would pay it back slowly. Now she needed more. "I can't," I said. Chris sighed. "She's in a really tough spot, man. That was her choice." My voice was calm, devoid of emotion. After hanging up, I put the conversation on my mind. A few days later, Chris sent me a text. It was a picture from hospital, a bed, and 4 drip. "Her dad's not doing well. She wants to talk to you." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from my project team's group chat. I switched over and started discussing the next round of testing. I never went back to Chris's message. That night, back in my apartment, I archived his chat. I didn't block him, but I didn't reply. In that moment, I knew with absolute clarity that it wasn't about being heartless. It was about setting a boundary. If I looked back even once, I'd be right back where I started. The next morning, I was even more focused in our team meeting. Carl noticed, and as the meeting wrapped up, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Good job." 2 simple words, but they were more powerful than any empty reassurance. 6 months later, the module I was in charge of passed its final review ahead of schedule. Headquarters sent an email, and a substantial bonus was wired directly to my account. Standing at the ATM, I suddenly remembered those days, 3 years ago, when I would agonize over the budget to save a few $100s on nursing supplies. That suffocating feeling felt a world away. During this time, Chloe didn't try to contact me through anyone else. I'd occasionally hear snippets from Chris. Her moods were erratic, and she'd gotten into fights with relatives. She went through several caregivers, but none of them lasted long. Someone saw her at the hospital, pushing her father's wheelchair by herself, crying in the hallway. When others told the story, it sounded pitiful. To me, it was just the past. By the second year of the project, I was promoted to an even more critical role, reporting directly to the executive board at headquarters. After one of those presentations, the room filled with applause. Standing in front of the projection screen, I suddenly thought of that day at the airport. If I had stayed, I'd probably still be at home, calculating the price of absorbent pads. That night, at a celebratory dinner, a colleague raised a glass to me. "You made the right choice coming here." I just smiled, saying nothing. Back in my apartment, after a shower, I lay in bed. My phone was quiet. No pleas for help, no accusations. I scrolled through my contacts. Her name was still gone. I felt nothing. The next morning, I went for a run. The sun glinted off the river, and the air was crisp. My steps felt light. It was a lightness I hadn't felt in 3 years. During my lunch break, another message came from Chris. It was a voice note. This time, I didn't even listen. I deleted it directly. As my finger pressed the screen, I knew exactly what I was doing. This wasn't avoidance. It was closure. In my 3rd year, headquarters offered me a permanent position, double the salary, along with the opportunity to return to the U.S. to lead the expansion into the Asian market. I stood by the window in the conference room, looking out at the distant city skyline. In that moment, I knew I no longer needed anyone else to validate my worth. Leaving hadn't been an escape. It was pulling myself out of a situation that was draining me dry. And over these 3 years, I had finally learned how to be responsible for myself. 03, when the official offer from headquarters arrived, I didn't reply immediately. The opportunity to return to the States was right in front of me, but I sat at my desk for a long time. 3 years had passed. My position was completely different. The new Asian market division was set to launch back home, and I would be one of its leaders. Before signing, I sent a message to Chris. How is she doing? I was a little surprised at myself for even sending it. He replied half an hour later. You really want to know? Just tell me. He called me directly. Liam, it's bad. She's not holding it together well. I didn't say anything. Chris lowered his voice. Her dad had another stroke last year. He can barely speak now. Her mom's mental state has gotten worse. She blames Chloe for everything. The caregivers quit every other week. The money is just hemorrhaging. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the busy figures in the conference area. I thought she quit her job. She did. She tried a few freelance gigs, working sales during the day and caregiving at night. After 6 months of that, she collapsed. The doctor said it was from pure exhaustion. He paused. She was in the emergency room, signing the consent forms all by herself. I remained silent. Chris added, when you were around, she never had to even think about any of this. His words landed like a stone in a quiet pond. I didn't argue. It was the truth. For 3 years, I had streamlined everything. The hospital follow-up schedule, the medication list, the nursing procedures, the emergency protocols. I had even kept a detailed inventory of the rubbing alcohol and gauze in the house. All she had to do was follow the system I built. As the call was ending, Chris sighed. When she talks about you now, she doesn't curse you out anymore. I hung up the phone. That night, for the first time in a long time, I couldn't sleep. At the team meeting the next day, I was still sharp. My report was organized, my data precise. When it was over, a colleague asked if I wanted to go out and celebrate the project's success. I declined. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and found the old digital backups I'd saved. The caregiving logs, page after page, neatly organized. I looked at them for a few minutes, then closed the file. It wasn't nostalgia. It was confirmation. Confirmation of what I had given. A week later, Chris sent me a photo. Not a hospital. It was a thick, worn-out notebook. She's been going through the stuff you left behind. The photo showed my handwritten caregiving instructions, the pages curled and softened with use. Chris said she'd never bothered to look at them seriously before. Now, she was following them page by page. Did she say anything? I asked. She said she never realized how detailed you were about everything. Chris paused. She held that notebook and just cried. I leaned back in my chair, saying nothing. News like that felt like a kind of retroactive payment. But time doesn't move backward. Over the next few months, Chris sent more sporadic updates. She sold her car, then her jewelry. Relatives visited a couple of times, but never stayed for more than a few hours. Someone suggested she put her parents in a nursing home, but she refused. If Liam could do it, so can I, she'd said. But she couldn't. Caregiving isn't just physical labor. It's a long-term, grinding erosion of the self. One night, her mother fell out of bed. Chloe couldn't lift her on her own and had to call 911. The neighbors complained about the noise. The building manager came by to give her a warning. She stood in the hallway, apologizing in a low voice. Hearing these stories from someone else felt like watching a movie through a thick fog. I didn't intervene. I didn't ask for any more updates. My work in Frankfurt was wrapping up. The Asian project was confirmed to be based in Chicago. I signed the contract. My return was scheduled for 3 months later. Before I left, Carl took me out for a farewell dinner. When you go back, you'll be dealing with a lot more personal connections, he said, looking at me. Don't let yourself get dragged down again. I nodded. He didn't know the story, but his advice was spot on. A week before my flight home, I got another call from Chris. Her mental state isn't good. What happened? She's on the verge of a breakdown. The last caregiver just quit, and she's alone with 2 invalids. Her mom screams at her, telling her she's useless and that she never should have driven you away. There was some noise on his end of the line. She told me she finally understand what your life was like for those 3 years. I didn't respond. Chris lowered his voice. Her biggest fear right now isn't the money. It's that there's no one to share the burden with. I closed my eyes, my breathing steady. That's something she has to face. This wasn't cold-blooded. It was a boundary. 3 years ago, I had waited for her to stand up and just once say, "This is hard on you." She never did. Now she understood, but that was all it was, understanding come too late. The day I flew back, I didn't tell any of my old friends. Landing in Chicago, the air felt familiar. The company sent a car service, and I went straight to my hotel. That evening, Chris asked to meet. In the coffee shop, his expression was complicated. "She knows you're back." I looked up. "Who told her?" "It's a small world, man." He hesitated. "She's in a really bad way. She wants to see you." I picked up my coffee but didn't drink it. What would seeing me solve? Chris fell silent. "Her biggest regret now is what she said to you that night." I watched the traffic outside. I remembered her words perfectly. I didn't need her to remind me. "Liam, she's really been crushed by reality." I didn't cause that. My tone was even. Chris nodded, not pushing it further. As we parted, he said one last thing. "She took you for granted back then. Now she finally knows what that meant." I went back to my hotel and opened my laptop to prepare for the next day's meeting. Emails poured in, one after another. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. I didn't answer. The screen went dark. Outside, the city night was deep and vast. I knew, with perfect clarity, that some collapses are inevitable. Only when a person loses their support do they finally understand its weight. And I was already on a different path. Her inability to cope was a chapter in her life. Not mine. 04, my first month back in Chicago, was a blur of nonstop work. The Asian market division was officially launched, and as one of its heads, I was the direct liaison between our global headquarters and the U.S. board. Our offices were on the top floor of a skyscraper in the Loop, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. It was a world away from 3 years ago. Back then, my life revolved around 2 hospital beds. Now it was filled with contracts, investors, and international video conferences. I led the presentation at our first board meeting. The room was filled with a dozen senior executives, the atmosphere tense. I broke down 3 years of market data into 4 distinct phases, from cost control to market entry, clearly outlining the risks and mitigation strategies for each step. Halfway through, one of the board members interrupted me. "The FDA approval timeline in the U.S. is notoriously long. Your schedule is too aggressive." I didn't back down. I pulled up my contingency plan. "We've already factored in the approval process. The timeline is a conservative estimate. We can begin establishing distribution channels in parallel." He stared at me for a few seconds, then said no more. When the meeting concluded, the CEO made the final call. "The plan is approved. Liam, you have full authority to move this forward." The applause was sparse, but it was enough. As I walked out of the conference room, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I glanced at it and let it go to voicemail. 3 years had passed. Some calls didn't need to be answered. That evening, the company hosted a reception to celebrate the new division's launch. The venue was a private club in a high-rise in River North. The lighting was soft, the air filled with conversation. I held a glass of whiskey, networking with a few potential investors. They were all business, asking about profit margins and ROI. My answers were sharp and confident. Mid-conversation, someone made an introduction. "Liam, I'd like you to meet Eleanor Vance." I turned. She wore a tailored black dress, her short hair chic and professional. Her demeanor was calm, her expression unreadable. The Vance family was old money in Chicago, with holdings in healthcare, real estate, and private equity. She extended her hand. "I've heard good things." Her voice was clear, without a trace of empty flattery. I shook her hand. "A pleasure." She skipped the small talk. "Your return to the States. Is this a long-term play or a short-term project? The question was direct. Long-term, I replied. She nodded. Then we should talk about a partnership. The background music was quiet as we stood in a corner. Every question she asked was strategic: distribution channels, cash flow management, regulatory risks. She wasn't interested in my feelings, only my capabilities. After half an hour, I had a clear read on her. She wasn't here to socialize. She was here to vet potential partners. As we parted, she handed me her business card. My office. Tomorrow afternoon. The next day, I arrived at Vance Capital on time. The conference room was empty except for her and an assistant. She put a proposal on the projector screen. We're prepared to lead the first round of funding on one condition. You personally oversee the entire rollout. I smiled. I was planning to. She looked at me, her gaze steady. I reviewed your file from 3 years ago. You walked away from an opportunity once before. I didn't look away. That was the past. She didn't press further, simply nodding. I only partner with people who can stand by their decisions. The deal was signed quickly. With Vance Capital on board, the project accelerated. In the weeks that followed, we met frequently. In meetings, she always put her phone on silent, her focus absolute. During heated debates, she never raised her voice, but every word she spoke was precise and impactful. Once, we had a disagreement over capital allocation, and the other stakeholders were wavering. She made the call. The risk is manageable. We proceed as planned. After the meeting, I asked her what made her so decisive. She gave a faint smile. In investing, hesitation is the greatest cost. Her words stuck with me. She was not a person ruled by emotion. A month later, we held a project launch ceremony. The press and our partners were all there. I gave the keynote speech as the project lead. She stood in the audience, making no effort to steal the spotlight. Afterward, she approached me. You did well today. Her tone was natural, not exaggerated. The first time we had dinner alone was at a small restaurant near her office. She ordered for both of us without hesitation. I don't like to waste time, she explained. I looked at her. And in relationships? She met my gaze. Especially in relationships. The words hung in the air, not flirtatious, but clear. She never asked about my past. I never offered it. Some experiences don't need to be used as bargaining chips. During that time, the project hit a critical phase. One night, we were working late until 10. The conference room was empty except for us. With files piled on the table, she asked unexpectedly, "Have you ever thought about finding someone who is a true partner?" I stopped writing. She continued, "If we can be partners in business, we can be partners in life." She said it directly, without any games. I looked at her. The feeling of being drained, the feeling that had defined my last relationship, was a distant memory. With her, it was the complete opposite. "Why me?" I asked. She answered softly, "Because you take responsibility. You don't shift blame. You own your choices." There were no sweet nothings, but her words carried immense weight. I didn't respond right away. She didn't push. A few days later, she invited me to meet her father, the patriarch of the Vance family, a man who kept a low profile. Over dinner, he asked me only one question. "What is your 5-year plan?" I laid out my strategy, clear and concrete, with no embellishment. The old man listened, then nodded. The most important thing for a young man is to not go backward. I understood his meaning. That night, as I drove Eleanor home, she looked at me in the car. "I will never interfere with your career, and I will never ask you to change your path for me." Her tone was even. "But I will not tolerate indecision." I smiled. "Neither will I." There was no grand declaration, no formal ceremony. Our relationship progressed with a quiet understanding. A month later, she brought me to a Vance family board meeting. My role was clear: a business partner and the man she had chosen. Someone asked me privately, "Things are moving so fast between you two." "We're adults," I replied. "We're efficient." The project took root, and market feedback was strong. My reputation in the industry grew. At the same time, word of my return spread through my old circles. Some people tried to probe about my past. I always kept it brief. The past was over. It didn't need to be rehashed. One weekend afternoon, Eleanor and I were at a construction site, checking on the progress of a new facility. The sun was bright. She wore a hard hat, standing before the steel framework, giving directions. I suddenly realized something. She stood beside me not as a dependent, but as an equal. In that moment, I knew my answer. Marriage wasn't the continuation of a duty. It was a choice. And this time, I was choosing with my eyes wide open. 05 Eleanor and I didn't make a formal announcement about our relationship, but we didn't hide it either. Our business partnership was thriving, our families had met, and a wedding was on the horizon. It was at this point that Chloe showed up. She appeared at my office one morning, just after I'd finished a meeting with our suppliers. My assistant knocked and entered hesitantly. "Mr. Foster, there's someone downstairs to see you. She says she's an old acquaintance." I looked up. "What's her name?" My assistant paused. "Chloe Price." The air in the room seemed to tighten. I put down my pen. "Send her up." I wasn't going to hide. A few minutes later, she was standing at my office door. 3 years had changed her. She was much thinner. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes looked worn, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She saw me and froze, clearly taken aback by my appearance. The well-fitted suit, the look of calm confidence. Her throat moved, but it took her a moment to speak. "Liam, gjestil for her to seat. What can I do for you?" She perched on the edge of the sofa, her fingers twisting the strap of her handbag. "I heard you were back." "I am." She looked down, her voice soft. "I went by your old company. They told me you're doing really well." I didn't reply to that. After a few seconds of silence, she let out a bitter little laugh. "You know, I used to complain that you weren't ambitious enough." I just looked at her, my expression neutral. She looked up, her eyes turning red. What I said that night, I was just angry. I knew which night she meant. Her voice started to tremble. I was so tired, so stressed out. I wasn't thinking. "Please don't take it seriously." The office was quiet. "It wasn't just a moment of anger, Chloe," I said. "It was what you truly felt." Her shoulders went rigid. "I didn't know how much you were doing," she said, her words tumbling out faster. "After you left, I found your notebooks. I read every page. You even tracked my parents' daily temperature fluctuations." Her voice cracked. I used to think that was all just expected. I let her speak. Suddenly, she stood up and took a step closer. "Liam, I get it now. After you were gone, I realized how hard it all was." She looked me straight in the eye. "Can we start over? Please." Just as the words left her mouth, there was a soft knock on the door. Eleanor walked in. She was holding a file, her steps steady and composed. She paused for a second when she saw Chloe, but her expression didn't change. "Am I interrupting?" I stood up. "No." Chloe turned to look at her, her eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. Eleanor walked to my side and placed a file on my desk. "The investor contracts need your final sign-off." Her tone was professional, as if this were any other workday. Chloe's gaze darted between us, and her face slowly drained of color. I spoke. "Chloe, this is Eleanor Vance." I offered no other title, but it was enough. Chloe's lip quivered. "You two are." Eleanor nodded, her voice even. "We're engaged." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Chloe stumbled back a step, catching herself on the arm of the sofa. "So fast." I didn't feel the need to explain the timeline. A relationship isn't a race. Her eyes welled up with tears. "Are you doing this on purpose?" "Getting engaged right after you came back." My voice was steady. "I chose the right person for me." Her face twisted as if I'd struck her. "And what about me? What about our 3 years?" I looked at her. Those 3 years were carried by me alone. All the color vanished from her face. Eleanor didn't say a word, just stood quietly by my side. Chloe suddenly turned on her. "Do you have any idea what he did for me? For my family?" Eleanor met her gaze, her voice calm. "Edo." Chloe froze. Eleanor continued. "And because I know, I also know what he deserves." The air crackled with tension. Chloe's emotions finally broke through. "It's not that I didn't appreciate it. I just didn't understand back then." Her voice echoed in the office. Someone walked past the door, their footsteps pausing for a moment before moving on. I lowered my voice. "This is a place of business." She started to cry. "You're not going to give me a single chance?" I didn't hesitate. "No," the word was final. She stared at me, searching my face for any sign of weakness. "I can handle it now. I can share the burden with you." I shook my head. It was never about sharing the burden. It was about respect. She looked confused. "I can respect you now." I looked at her. "Back when I was cooking in your kitchen, you were arguing with me over the cost of nursing pads." Her tears stopped for a second. You told me I was meddling. Her shoulders began to shake. You thought I would never leave. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Eleanor never intervened. She just stood there, her presence a silent statement. Chloe suddenly turned back to her. And you? You're really okay with his past? With those 3 years? Eleanor's voice was cool. That's his past. It's not my competition. The line was delivered with clean, sharp precision. Chloe completely fell apart. She covered her face with her hands, her sobs muffled and desperate. I thought you would wait for me. I didn't answer. Waiting has to go both ways. After a few minutes, her crying subsided. When she looked up, her eyes were red and swollen. My dad was hospitalized again last week, she said abruptly. He can't speak clearly anymore. I didn't ask for details. She looked at me, a final glimmer of hope in her eyes. Don't you feel anything for him? Aren't you even a little bit sorry for him? I met her gaze calmly. That is your responsibility. She froze. After a few seconds, it was as if a light went out inside her. She seemed to shrink. You really are gone. I didn't deny it. Eleanor picked up the file from my desk, her voice gentle but firm. Mr. Foster has another meeting. It wasn't a dismissal, but it was a clear boundary. Chloe stood there for a moment longer, then slowly nodded. She looked at me. I am sorry. Her voice was barely a whisper. It was the first real apology she had ever given me. I nodded once. Take care of yourself. She turned and left. Her silhouette looked frail as the door closed behind her, restoring the silence of the office. Eleanor looked at me. Do you need a minute? I shook my head. It's over. She didn't ask any more questions. She just pushed the file toward me. Then let's get back to it. I sat back down in my chair and signed the contract. The scratch of the pen was the only sound. Outside, the sun was shining, and some doors were now closed for good. 06 after the day, Chloe came to my office. I didn't hear from her again. A week later, Eleanor and I officially announced our engagement. We didn't issue a press release. I simply introduced her as my fiancée at a dinner with our business partners. She stood by my side, poised and graceful. This is my fiancé, Liam Foster. Her voice was calm, with no hint of showing off. After the dinner, we began planning the wedding. The Vance family was incredibly efficient. Within a week, the venue, guest list, and basic ceremony were all outlined. She asked for my input. Is there anyone special you'd like to invite? I thought for a moment. My colleagues and a few old friends are enough. She nodded, not prying. My parents flew in from out of state to help with the preparations. They were very impressed with Eleanor. My mother took me aside and said, that young woman has a good head on her shoulders. She knows her boundaries. I smiled. The word boundaries was more important than she knew. A month before the wedding, I took my father to the hospital for a routine checkup. As I was walking through the main lobby, I saw a familiar figure. Chloe. She was pushing a wheelchair, and in it sat her father. 3 years had taken their toll. He was gaunt, his face a pale, ashen color. When Chloe looked up and saw me, she froze. The air between us felt charged. Her father's gaze, tired and full of complex emotions, also landed on me. I walked over and gave a respectful nod. Mr. Price. His lips moved, and a raspy sound came out. Chloe's hands tightened on the wheelchair grips. What are you doing here? Her tone was defensive. My dad has an appointment. I kept my explanation brief. Her eyes scanned my tailored suit and the watch on my wrist, a flicker of something unreadable in her expression. I heard you're getting married. I am. A muscle in her jaw twitched. That was fast. I didn't respond. Her father suddenly reached out and grabbed my sleeve, his fingers trembling. Back then, I am sorry. His voice was faint but clear. I looked down at him. For a moment, a flood of memories returned, carrying him down the stairs in the middle of the night, feeding him his medication, helping him with his physical therapy. I gently pulled my arm away. Please take care of yourself, sir. Chloe's eyes reddened. How can you be so cold? This is a hospital. I replied evenly. Her retort died on her lips. A number was called over the loudspeaker, and she pushed the wheelchair away. I didn't follow. The wedding preparations continued. Eleanor, ever organized, had every detail on a spreadsheet. The day we went for our tuxedo and dress fitting, she stood before the mirror and asked, Are you worried that the past will affect our present? I looked at our reflection. No, she nodded. Good. Her trust was straightforward, without any hidden tests. A few days later, the front desk called my office. Mr. Foster, a woman is waiting for you in the lobby. She says it's urgent. I asked for a name. It was Chloe again. I frowned. Sent her up. This time, she looked even more worn out than before. Her eyes were filled with an anxious energy. Liam, I need to talk to you. Go ahead. She stood in front of my desk, refusing to sit. My dad's condition has gotten worse. The doctor is recommending long-term hospitalization. I looked at her. What do you want from me? She bit her lip. I know I have no right to ask, but you were always so good to him. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. My voice was calm. That was then. She suddenly raised her voice. Don't you have any loyalty? Doesn't our history mean anything? I heard footsteps pause outside my office door. I stood up. If you value that history, you wouldn't have treated it so cheaply back then. Her face went white. I've paid the price for that, she almost shouted. I've been doing this alone for 3 years. Do you have any idea how hard that is? I looked at her, my expression unchanging. That is the price you had to pay. She recoiled as if I had struck her. At that moment, the office door opened and Eleanor walked in. She had clearly heard the last few sentences. Her gaze moved between us, her voice cool. Should I leave? I shook my head. No need. Chloe looked at her, her eyes filled with a storm of emotions. Are you two really getting married? Eleanor nodded. The date is set. Chloe let out a bitter laugh. Do you know what he used to do for my family? Eleanor didn't flinch. Edo. Chloe was taken aback. And you trust him? Eleanor's voice was measured. A man who is willing to sacrifice for others is a man of character. She paused for a second. But that's only if the other person knows how to appreciate it. The words, spoken softly, landed with incredible weight. Chloe's shoulders slumped. I appreciate it now. Eleanor looked at her. Appreciation doesn't let you turn back time. The tension in the room was palpable. Tears streamed down Chloe's face. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I just want to prove that I can be there for him too. Eleanor looked her straight in the eye. Being there isn't something you say. It's a choice you make in the moment. Her tone was steady, not accusatory. When he was in your kitchen, you were arguing about expenses. Now that he's in a boardroom, you want to talk about feelings. The blood drained from Chloe's face. She opened her mouth, but no rebuttal came. After a few seconds, she deflated completely. So, I really did miss my chance. She looked at me. If I hadn't said that to you that night, I cut her off. Hypotheticals don't change reality. The office was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Eleanor moved to my side, her hand resting naturally on the edge of my desk. Her posture was a silent statement of solidarity. Chloe watched us, the light in her eyes slowly dimming. I just wanted to prove I'm not a bad person. Eleanor replied softly. No one said you were. You just didn't value what you had. The words were a final, quiet judgment. Chloe looked down. I won't bother you again. She turned and left. Her back was even heavier than the last time. After the door closed, Eleanor looked at me. Will this affect you? I shook my head. No. She nodded, not asking for more details. Good. Now, let's finalize the music for the ceremony. Her tone was normal, pulling the focus back to our future. Sunlight streamed through the window, landing on the floor. The final preparations were underway, and some chapters were finally, truly, coming to an end. 07 The wedding was set for early fall. Eleanor's family booked a seaside hotel for the event. The ceremony was elegant, but not extravagant, a tasteful affair. The night before, I stayed in a suite at the hotel with my parents in the adjoining room. Eleanor was with her bridesmaids. At 6 a.m., the stylists woke me. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten, the ocean a soft, grayish blue. My best man handed me the day's schedule. I glanced over it. Everything was in order. By 8, guests began to arrive. Business partners, family friends, and a few mentors from our industry. I stood at the entrance to the venue, greeting everyone. Dressed in a sharp tuxedo, I felt a profound sense of calm. When Eleanor emerged from the bridal suite, a hush fell over the room. Her dress was a simple, elegant white gown, with clean lines and no dramatic embellishments. She came to my side and whispered, "Nervous?" "I'm good." She smiled. "Then let's stick to the plan." The ceremony began. Music swelled as a gentle sea breeze drifted through the venue. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm. When she reached me, I took her hand. It was warm in mine. The officiant began the vows. We exchanged rings. Just then, A commotion broke out near the back of the venue. I heard murmurs ripple through the guests. I turned my head. Chloe was standing at the entrance. She wore a plain dress, her face pale. In her hand, she clutched a large manila envelope. Security moved to intercept her. Her voice trembled. I just want to say a few words. Eleanor glanced at me, her expression calm. I gave a slight nod. Let her in. A wave of unease passed through the guests. Chloe walked slowly toward the front. Her eyes were fixed on my hand, holding Eleanor's. She stared for a few seconds before opening the envelope and pulling out a stack of old photographs. There were pictures of me in her kitchen, wearing an apron. Pictures of me pushing her father's wheelchair. A picture of me slumped against a hospital corridor wall, asleep. Her hands were shaking. "This," she said, her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear, "is everything you did for my family." The venue fell silent. I didn't interrupt. She looked up at me. "For 3 years, you woke up at 6 every morning and never slept more than 4 hours a night." I used to think that was just normal. Tears began to stream down her face. Now I know it wasn't normal. It was a gift. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. Eleanor didn't let go of my hand. Chloe took a deep, shuddering breath. "My dad passed away 2 days ago." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. "Before he died, he told me to tell you he was sorry." Her voice was raw with grief. "He said he never should have let you carry so much." I watched her, my own emotions steady. She suddenly took another step forward. "Liam, I truly know I was wrong. I was afraid of the expense, the pressure, the responsibility. So I pushed it all onto you." Her body trembled. "I'm not a bad person. I was just selfish." The only sound was the gentle crash of waves on the shore. She looked up, her eyes burning with a desperate intensity. "Please, give me one more chance. I can change. I can share the burden with you now." Her voice was a final, ragged plea. "You once told me you would be with me forever." I looked at her. "Back then," I said, "I thought we were walking on the same path." Her tears flowed freely. "We can find it again." I spoke slowly, my voice clear. "Some paths can only be walked once." She froze. My tone was even. "Those 3 years were my commitment alone. You enjoyed the benefits but resented the process." The color drained from her face. "I'm willing to carry my share now." I looked at her. Responsibility isn't about fixing a mistake after the fact. Someone in the crowd drew a sharp breath. Eleanor remained by my side, a silent, unwavering presence. Her position was clear without her having to say a word. Chloe's hand went limp, and the photos scattered at her feet. She crouched down, trying to gather them, but her hands were shaking too much. "I just wanted to prove that I didn't just use you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I looked down at her, my voice firm but not unkind. True appreciation happens in the moment, not in hindsight. She looked up, her eyes empty. "So this is really it? We're really over?" I nodded. "We have been for a long time." After a few seconds of silence, a strange, faint smile touched her lips. "I see now. What I lost wasn't a relationship. It was the one person who was willing to give me everything." She slowly stood up, stuffing the photos back into the envelope. "I am sorry." This time, there were no tears. She gave me one last long look. Then she turned and walked away. No one stopped her. The sea breeze caught her hair. Her silhouette, small and solitary, disappeared through the doors. The venue returned to order. The officiant looked at me, uncertain. I gave a slight nod. The ceremony continued. I turned back to Eleanor. Her eyes were clear and steady. "Are you ready to continue?" she asked quietly. I squeezed her hand. "Absolutely." The vows resumed. I looked at her and made my promise. It wasn't a promise born of duty or guilt. It was a choice. Applause filled the air, mingling with the sound of the ocean. This final, unexpected farewell had finally brought everything to a close. 08 Eleanor and I didn't take a long honeymoon. Our new venture was in a critical growth phase, so we only took off for 3 days. We returned to our condo in the city, and life quickly settled into a new rhythm. She was an early riser who went for a run every morning. I would get up and handle calls with our overseas teams. We managed our time efficiently. Work was work. In the evenings, we always had dinner together. She never checked my schedule or looked through my phone. I never questioned her about her own networking events. This mutual respect and space made our life together feel effortless. 3 months after the wedding, we launched a new investment fund together. Vance Capital provided the backing, and I managed the operations and vetted the projects. At our first pitch meeting, I stood on stage outlining our strategic vision. She sat in the front row, her focus entirely on me. Afterward, her only comment was, "You paced that perfectly." The feedback was brief, but it held weight. We sometimes disagreed when discussing business. Once, we were at odds over capital allocation for a new acquisition. The tension in the boardroom was thick, but she never got emotional. She just laid out the data, point by point. "Your logic is sound, Liam, but you're not accounting for the market window." I was silent for a moment as I recalculated. She was right. Our arguments were never confrontations. They were collaborations. Things changed at home, too. My parents moved to Chicago, into a condo not far from ours. Eleanor was the one who suggested we have dinner together every weekend. She would talk with my mother about everything from market trends to new recipes. There was no forced attempt to win them over, just a natural, easy rapport. One evening, we were on our balcony, drinking wine. She asked, out of the blue, "Do you ever think about the past?" I looked out at the city lights. "Sometimes." She nodded. "It's part of your story. It's not a burden." She never shied away from my past, but she never dwelled on it either. That kind of confidence was a gift. 6 months later, our fund reported its first profitable quarter. When a financial journal requested an interview, she insisted I take the lead. "He knows the operational details better than anyone," she told the reporter. She stood to the side, only stepping in to add a key strategic point here and there. After it was over, we sat in the car for a while in comfortable silence. I had a sudden realization. Marriage wasn't about being diminished. It was about being amplified. It amplified your strengths, your confidence, your trust. One weekend, I was walking with my parents in the park. The sun was warm, and it wasn't too crowded. On a bench in the distance, I saw a familiar figure. Chloe. She was thinner, her hair cut short. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans. She was looking at her phone and didn't see me. My first instinct was to walk the other way. But then she looked up and our eyes met. We stared at each other from across the lawn. She hesitated for a moment, then stood up and walked over. Her expression was calm. "It's been a while." "Yeah." She glanced at my parents and gave them a polite nod. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Foster." My mother looked surprised, but returned the greeting. "Hello." After a moment of awkward small talk, my parents continued their walk, giving us some space. Chloe stood before me, all of her old, frantic energy gone. "My mom passed away last month," she said quietly. I nodded. "I'm sorry for your loss." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "It's just me now." The wind rustled the leaves in the trees. She looked out at the pond. "I got a new job, office admin. The pay isn't great, but it's enough." She didn't bring up the past, didn't talk about relationships. "That's good," I said. She turned to look at me. "You look happy." "I am." She was quiet for a moment. "I shouldn't have shown up at your wedding," she said, her voice even. "I was just trying to fight for myself one last time." I didn't hold it against her. Everyone fights for themselves. She nodded. "Yeah, but some chances you only get one." The awkwardness between us had faded. We were like two lines that had once intersected, but were now heading in completely different directions. She looked into the distance. "I finally understand now. You were right to leave." I didn't comment on her judgment. She added softly, "You were too good to me back then. So good that I forgot that kind of devotion isn't a given. It's rare." I looked at her. "It has to go both ways." She nodded, offering no argument. In the distance, my mother looked back at me. I gestured that I would be right there. Chloe took a step back. "You should go." I nodded. "Take care, Chloe." She didn't say anything else. She just stood there and watched me walk away. I rejoined my parents. My mother asked quietly, "That was her?" "Yes." My mother sighed, but said no more. We continued our walk. Sunlight filtered through the trees, dappling the path. Life had found its proper course. When I got home that evening, Eleanor was in the kitchen, making dinner. I went over and started chopping vegetables next to her. She glanced at me. "You saw someone today." It wasn't a question. An old acquaintance. She didn't ask for details. "And how do you feel?" I thought about it. "At peace." She smiled. "That's all that matters." At the dinner table, we talked about our projects and my parents' upcoming checkups. Life was made of these small, steady moments. Late that night, I stood by the window, looking out at the sprawling city lights. I felt no guilt, no regret. Everyone has to live with the consequences of their choices. And I had finally become the man I wanted to be.